Laura Heister, the Farm Girl Farm. Farm Girl.
Well, I just wanted to say that I do not consider myself an expert. As someone going into my 7th season of vegetable growing, I think I'm in the kindergarten or 1st grade of vegetable production. But the reason I'm standing here is because I'm so lucky and so privileged to be able to do what I love to do in the context of a movement that is so strong that there is a market. There are people who want to buy what I grow. And I wouldn't be able to do that without the leaders who've come before me, who are working out there now. But I'm not growing vegetables because I think I should, because it sounds awesome, because it's noble. I'm doing it because I love it, and I'm so lucky to be able to. So I studied art history in college, and when I was in college, I worked up in Vermont at a summer camp that was based on a small farm, but that wasn't why I was there. I was just there to be outside for a while. And but a lot of the food was grown in a garden that the campers worked along with the staff. And towards the beginning of my 1st season, there were always announcements about what the food was before we had a meal. And I'm working with 8-year-olds, 8 to 11-year-old girls, and there were about 120 of them. And one of the girls announced, today for lunch, all of the spinach that we're having was grown in our garden. And the crowd erupted in a roar, cheers, and I'm standing there thinking, why is everyone? I didn't really get it. And then it sunk in when I got to the table and I saw the spinach, and I realized that it just clicked. And so that for me was kind of a turning point. When I went back to the city and finished school and started working in the museum, I kept finding myself more interested in working with my hands than I was in the theories behind the work that I was so lucky to be holding and touching and writing about. So I started wanting to make photographs rather than study photographs, and I started wanting to make video and film, and I ended up coming out here to learn how to do that. And when I got here, I immediately started going to the farms and photographing and video taping there. I thought I'll use all the training that I have to tell the stories of small farms and tell the stories of family farms and educational farms. And then by the end of that year, I was volunteering on a farm and then working a few hours on a farm, and then eventually now I am doing what I do. So I think whatever I can say, whatever I can answer for anybody from my personal perspective, I mean, it's just an incredibly personal and privileged choice that I have to be able to do this at this point in time. And I sort of feel like I should say, that it's all because of my great idealism, but I'm not so idealistic anymore. It just makes sense. And a lot of people talk about us being in this community, we're ahead of our time, but I think we're also kind of, it's like we're back to real time. This is just what makes sense. That it's just very simple. Grow food, eat food. So that's where I'm coming from. So
great. Thanks. Thank you, Laura. Brian Alberg from the Red Lion Inn.
Hi, everybody. I'm much more comfortable in the kitchen, so. Having listened to the previous 3 and Michael Pollan speak a little bit, I have a dilemma, and I think we all do, in that there's so many different facets of what this topic has to do with. We need to provide nutritious food for our kids. We need to help support the local farmers. We need to keep our landscape vibrant, to keep tourists coming, to keep the whole economy flowing. One of my best friends is a commercial dairy farmer. He lives locally. His kids go to our schools. He's a local family, and what do we do to help support him? My food philosophies definitely lean towards small farms, artisan growers, things like that. And I feel that in order to spread that word, we need to educate our kids. I work with Rail Street Youth Project to help broaden their knowledge of the importance of local foods, local economies. You know, and from a culinary standpoint, it makes my job easier to use local foods. The products that Ted grows or Laura grows or Lila raises, I don't have to do much to it. I mean, it makes my life easier. It allows me to not hide behind my food, not hide behind a presentation. I'm serving things that represent what our region is all about. Laura had a good point about how people talk about us being ahead of our time. I think we need to go back in time. And it needs to be more about what our forefathers did. How did, they survive? How did they raise things? And put the amount of care back into those practices that we had then. So that's all I got.
That's great, Brian. Thank you. We'll next hear from Lila Burley.
Well, not too many of you see me in my farm mode, but that is who I really am. And for 6 generations, my family has been involved in growing food, eating food, and having lots of kids. Maybe too many for the planet. I would like to start by saying it is so complicated, this issue. Wendell Berry I met last year, and he said, Lila, you shouldn't have that tractor. And I love my tractor. It's really good. And it does a lot of work that I couldn't do without it. He said, I have 2 horses. And that's quite wonderful. Here's a man in his 80s who is still using horses. And he is living in a limited way because that's what he wants to do. He thinks it's good for the world. In my lifetime, when I was, before I was 10 years old in the 40s, the war was going on, and the only thing I really remember about that period is that my dad was away, which was okay, and my mom was wonderful, and she decided that we should have victory gardens. And all our neighbors had victory gardens. And I learned at an early age that if you take a pea pod off a vine, it is the best tasting pea pod in the world. And anybody who's ever done that, or snap a bean off of a plant and eat it as you stand there in the sun, a strawberry that's warmed by the sun. How many people now have that chance to actually be on the soil that is growing and touching what the plant that grew the thing that you're eating? And I just remember that vividly. And to this day, anytime I see somebody's garden, I'm very much of a snitch if I can get near the pea pods. Later, as I got around with a car and so on, I saw cows in every pasture. There was nothing between Lenox and Pittsfield except for the Howard Johnson, which is now the Dakota, and Bernie Collins veterinarian place. There was nothing. It was all farms. There were animals everywhere, and both sides of the road were open fields. And if you know anything about ecology and environments, which all of you do because you're all sophisticated, the fact is you need, for the diversity of species and so on that we all experience here in the Berkshires, you need open fields, woods, and good water. And we have an abundance of all. In my lifetime, it has changed dramatically. There are no cows. You have to really think to find a cow in a pasture. If you want to take a drive on a Sunday, you don't find them. And so, I love the fact that everybody drives by the sheep farm endlessly and sometimes obtrusively when we're trying to cross the road or something with a bunch of them, everything stops and the sheep scatter and the whole 9 yards. But the presence of animals does more than just produce food. The vegetables that we grow on our land does more than just grow food. It is, for our souls, really important. And that's where Wendell Berry, Polland, and some of those great thinkers come in. The big picture, as Brian just said, is that we should go back to a simpler life. perhaps in major ways. In the Berkshires, the pressure of people who come in with money to build big houses and live fancy lives is something that I think locally we should try to stop, or limit, not stop, because we need it, but we need to limit what happens to our roadsides and our hills and so on. I killed him. What I know is most of us don't have to live in a house bigger than 8,000 square feet. And most of us don't have to have swimming pools and a whole lot of things. The Victory Gardens were really wonderful. And people grew them in their backyards on little tiny pieces of land. I think what Laura is doing on 4 acres is phenomenal. I think if more people were doing that, I also had a dream when I started with my sheep that everybody could have 6 sheep in their backyard, and no lawnmowers would have to be burning, petrol and everything. And they're lovely to watch. They're very good. They're better than goldfish for your nerves because they go around. They're wonderful, and they're very benign. But I'm really serious about that. People. Some of the towns have not let people have chickens, but even 2 chickens can give you some nice food in your backyard, and if you don't get a rooster, you're okay. But the rooster seems to be the problem. But I wake up every morning, I am so excited about the day that's coming, and that I love to watch the sun come up, and I just kind of look at the sun coming up, and then I'm off. And every day of my life, I'm going to be 74 in a couple of weeks, I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing so vigorously. I'm on that tractor sometimes 12 hours making hay in the summer. But I believe in no hormones, no pesticides. I haven't put fertilizer on any of my land, commercial fertilizer, for 15 years at least. It's about due in one field, I know, to have something that needs a little potassium, which I can't get through the sheep. But basically, the manure is what provides for that land to produce beautiful grass, and that's all the sheep get. They do get a little grain when they're in their pens with their moms the first few days of their life. But basically, the land that I am husbanding, I really love it. I know where the water comes up. The geese today were coming in where the water's gone through the snow now. I mean, every piece of that land is unique. The sheep are in areas where nothing else would be happy. You couldn't grow vegetables on the hillside there. If you've been by the farm, you know it's very steep and it goes up and it's very rocky. The sheep are in heaven climbing up on those rocks and cavorting and so on. It's really wonderful to watch. I have guard dogs so that I don't have to put out poison for coyotes. The guard dogs are a little bit threatening to some of the neighbors, but mostly they stay where they belong, mostly. And they do keep the coyotes away. And so the coyotes coexist with us. So there's a whole system around that farm. And I think that Laura could tell you that her 4 acres has got special things. She's right on the Green River, aren't you? Yeah, right on the Green River, which is one of the cleanest rivers in Berkshire County. And I have a real problem with corn growers, commercial corn growing in the Berkshires. I don't think that we are really a place where that should be happening, because we have a lot of water that is really valuable, and they put an awful lot of awful stuff on corn. And I don't know that we can say that. I don't know. I mean, people own their land and so on. But I think that we should be more proactive about protecting what we have. The soil is limited. We should be building it, not detracting from it. Growing the same crop every year, it does not make sense. More land should be preserved. People with 2 acres in their backyard, I think Laura could grow quite a bit. I think that putting some kind of an easement that keeps it open is only going to help the whole county. We have a lot of people come in, but we do need to preserve what we have so that they will come. They won't come if we don't have it nice here. And I just say, all of you, any piece of land you have, grow some carrots. I mean, if you pull them before they're big enough, that's not a good idea. But that's what I always did when I was little. But if you wait a little bit, they are so delicious if you grow them in your own ground.
Thank you, Lila. I know we have other farmers here tonight. We have other people who make their livelihood with the food industry and nutrition, and we all eat. So I invite anybody who'd like to make a comment or ask questions to come to one of the microphones. Just introduce your name and the town that you live in, please. And you don't have to be shy. We had lots of people just waiting in line last month. Once they got the hang of that, it was you're among friends, and it's really easy to come up and just talk. Thank you.
Well, my name is Bill Densmore. I'm from Williamstown, and I want to express a concern that troubles me as I think about the future of the planet where we are growing so many people so quickly. I worry that the movement to small agricultural approaches, that we may have trouble making enough food to sustain the growth of the planet, and that we're going to end up running out of food and having all kinds of problems that way. I don't feel like I'm up to speed on that issue well enough, and I wonder if there's anybody in the room here who can sort of make me feel more comfortable that we aren't going to, that if we forsake corporate farming too much, which has become very efficient at making a lot of food, albeit not very good food, that we will end up precipitating a famine crisis.
Could we ask you to come to the microphone and speak? And come on up, Ted. Come to the microphone and make your comment. Thank you. You know a lot about this.
Well, I think that's a huge and enormous subject.
Could you please say your name and where you live,
yeah.
Ted?
I'm Ted Dobson. I'm from Sheffield. You know, I've been at this for about 30 years, and I started off as a crazy hippie. And my idea was to grow on small acreage, just show it could be done. And I remember being at something like this, and a big commercial farmer got up and said, you know, you sound good, but there's no way, no how that small organic agriculture is going to be any kind of solution to feeding the world. And that created a rousing debate in the room. But, you know, years later, I thought, man, the guy's got a good point. There's a lot of people to feed, and we didn't get this way sort of haphazardly. Some might argue it has been somewhat haphazard, but it's going to be a mix. I think arguably even big commercial organic agriculture has a place, certainly has a place in the commercial world. There are ways to grow food ecologically, synergistically, on much larger scales that aren't being looked at. So small-scale agriculture is not in danger of overtaking the system. That would be an interesting world to live in, though. Mm-hmm. You know.
Thank you, Ted.
Throw in the corporate farms.
Use the microphone, Lila, please. We're recording the program.
The corporate farms are necessary, perhaps at this time in our lives. If you have ever driven by one of them and smell what's going on there, it contaminates the whole area they're in. The hormones that they give those animals are just raising havoc with the fertility rates. You know, we won't have people if we go on the way we are. The hormones are disruptors that disrupt to make them grow faster so that they don't, you know, get to have babies as soon. I can tell you that the statistics during my lifetime are really awful about people having fertility problems. Hormones, antibiotics are in all of our food if we don't know where it is coming from for the most part. And that, I think, is a bigger threat than running out of food. We are limited ourselves. Our land is limited. We need to take care of the land we have, be it 1 acre, 6 acres, 400 acres, whatever it is, we should be taking better custodians of our land and not contaminating it. I really believe that strongly.
I'm Linda K. Moses from Dalton. I'm very privileged because I am a member of Caretaker for a wonderful CSA, and I'm a member of Berkshire Grown. And that privilege has allowed me access to wonderful food and wonderful concepts about food. When I go away, I have a friend house sit for me, and she gets my share that week at Caretaker Farm. And she works for an agency that, social service agency that helps young unwed mothers live with their kids in a residential setting. And so one of the times that she went up to Caretaker Farm, she brought a whole car full of these young women with her to allow them to have my share of vegetables that week. And she walked with them through the barn at Caretaker Farm where all the bins were overflowing with these gorgeous vegetables. And she'd point to a vegetable and they'd say, no. And the next vegetable, no. And finally, one of the women was willing to take one potato from the potato bin. And they got back in the car, and she leaned over to my friend and she said, would you tell me, please, how to cook this? So I think that, yes, we can talk about how we're growing healthy food and how to do it and how to keep our land safe and not have animals that are loaded with hormones and antibiotics. But until we really educate the people like these young women about what kale really is and what a potato really is and what it can do for you, in the company of wonderful carrots that you pull up yourself and strawberries you might pick yourself, they're not going to get the nutrition that they need.
Hi, my name's Adele Gravitz. I'm newly from Stockbridge for 12 days. I just moved here from Washington, D.C. My question's a little bit of a different nature. Thank you. And that is in terms of food security, how much of the issue is that people can't get to a grocery store? That was something I was working on in D.C., and it's they can't get to a grocery store because there aren't any within a certain distance of where they live, or part of that is a transportation issue. So just being new to a very rural community, and I know that from the work I did, that was a big issue, and I know that there's also a lot of federal funding to help put grocery stores into places where they need it. So that's my question.
Is there anyone who has information on accessibility, proximity of food sources? Please.
Hi, my name is Kim McMahon, and I'm employed by the Food Bank of Western Mass, so Andrew is my boss's boss. And I work in North County in 7 communities considered Northern Berkshire on food security issues. And I can tell you, at least in North County, there's not a lot of good public transportation, but people can get to grocery stores. We had a free service where we were willing to give people rides from North County down to Pittsfield to the Price Right, and we had a bunch of elders who signed up for that service, and they asked if they could be dropped off at Friendly's before the van went to Price Right, because they really just wanted a ride out to lunch. And if they needed to get to Price Right, their kids brought them there. What people don't have access to are things like the farmer's market, and when the farmer's market is open. The farmer's market that runs on Thursday evenings in Pittsfield has one of the highest redemption rates of WIC coupons for farmer's markets in the county. And I have to say, in North County, we see almost no WIC coupons, and that's because our farmers markets are all on Saturday mornings from 9 to 11, which is 9 to 12. Really difficult time for young families to get their kids on a bus downtown or to the farmers market. So the access to processed, prepared, grocery store foods, the Rite Aid now accepts SNAP benefits, which is EBT or food stamps, and there's groceries a lot of places, and people seem to be able to, I work with folks up on Florida Mountain and in Savoy and Clarksburg, and they seem to be able to get rides places. It seems like people at agencies say, oh, it's a really big problem and people can't get a ride to the grocery store, and that's why they're not eating healthy foods. But what we've found, it's great that the woman that took the potato wanted to know how to cook it. I did an intergenerational meal program with moms and kids, and had a mom and a teenager told them we were making potatoes. They were psyched because they love potatoes. And I started putting the potatoes on the counter, and the 13-year-old girl was like, ew, those are gross, what's that? It's all dirty. And I was like, those are potatoes. And the mom said, oh, those aren't the kind of potatoes we eat. So I said, well, what kind of potatoes do you guys eat? And this is a mom of a teenager, so someone who's been raising a child and a lovely teenager, good mom. And we sort of talked through, well, when you go in, where do you shop? We go to Big Y. All right, so you walk in Big Y, you go straight, no, as soon as we go in, we take a right. All right, well, you take a right, and then where are all the beans and the carrots and all that stuff? And I'm like, well, that's in that first row when you go straight. Oh, no, we never go down. So finally I figured out that they buy canned potatoes that they then make mashed potatoes out of, and that they fry, and that they had no idea what a potato peeler was because they don't have skins on them. And it had never occurred to her to go straight in the grocery store and go down the aisle with the uncooked potatoes. So I don't think, what I've seen in the 7 towns I work with in North County and the families we've worked in a number of different ways, it isn't so much an access to the grocery store as what do you do with that stuff, and is it actually fresh food? And we've got gardens in a number of low-income neighborhoods and at all of the schools in North Adams. And all it takes is a kid to pop a cherry tomato in his mouth once, and they're sold. But until that, they'll say things like, I'm not allowed to eat that because it was in the dirt, or I think a bug peed on that, I'm not allowed to eat it. And they're not kidding. Their mom has told them not to eat anything out of that garden because it was in the dirt. So the disconnect, at least up in North County, is not so much in getting to the store as what you get and what you do with it.
How to prepare the food.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, we all used to take home economics and were taught to cook in school if we weren't taught at home, but I think that's maybe coming back.
I'm Carol Purcell, and I live in Great Barrington, and I'm with the People's Pantry. And I second what you say, that a lot of people who come to the pantry, where we have wonderful fresh food from the Indian Line Farm, courtesy of Berkshire Grown, they truly don't know what to do with a lot of the lovely fresh stuff. But we have 7 rotating teams, most of us are older, and we can tell them what to do with kale and white turnips and things like that. But I do want to say, I understood the frame of reference you created for us in your opening remarks. And I have a lot of questions because we were privileged as a family to live in underdeveloped countries. And I know people don't have access to nutritious food. Somehow, we have to continue to try to educate, which is what your point was, and your point too. And I'm not quite sure how we do that, because what you said earlier about people being able to buy food to fill their stomachs, even if it isn't healthy food, when they've worked a hard day and they're not going to get a head of broccoli and steam it or cook it. And that's the thing that perplexes me the most. And I also want to second what you said, because now the pantry has opened 2 miles away from the center of Great Barrington, and it's not a bus line, but people have been able to find their way there by pooling transportation. But those of us who work with the people who need food because they're food insecure have to try to meet them with patience and education as to what to do with some of the wonderful stuff, but we have bad stuff too. We have the little packages of macaroni and cheese, and I'll say, a pound of pasta and a jar of spaghetti sauce would give you several meals, whereas one of those little boxes of macaroni and cheese will only satisfy 2 or 3 of you. Oh, but my children love it. And that's what we try to work to overcome.
Thank you.
My name is Brad Wagstaff. I'm from New Marlboro. And my concern, or actually I want to say that Mrs. Burley said to me what was very interesting, that you can drive from one end of Berkshire County to the other and not see an animal. I think the secret to a lot of the food issues are that we're not producing enough. I think we have the land. but it's underutilized. And these New Yorkers that we have spoken of, or people who own a lot of land, tend to give it away. They do to eliminate housing developing nearby, they give it away for conservation districts or whatever. And a lot of this is good land for animals. And I think that this Berkshire County should grow and produce more livestock than it has, and I think we find, at least in meat production in this county, grow considerably. Thank you.
I respect what you say there, but I think that the land with more animals can't happen if you have a whole lot more houses. I think that there is a real disconnect, and most of the farmers that I deal with, as they get older, they sell off a piece because they need money to survive in their old age. And so therefore, I think that the preservation, whether it's a CR or APR farm, which is agricultural preservation, or one thing I believe very strongly, and I wish it could happen in my lifetime, is that every town has something called 61A that gives relief to people who are growing more than $500 worth of produce, meat or vegetables, and you get a very good tax relief. They have that, with that privilege, they have a lien where they can buy the land, have right of first refusal. And no town that I know of in Berkshire County has acted on that right of first refusal. This is a huge tool in our hands. And I don't think that the public has really understands that part of it. The farmers understand it because we do get tax relief. But I do think that is an area where if more people knew about it, we might end up having more farms stay open. The pressure's huge. And I made a decision to put a conservation easement on some land in Monument Valley because I don't want my children, who I love dearly and who have children, to build houses on that land. I want it there for all the things that are out there. Plus, I make a lot of grass out there. And so I think that the choices are human, but we need to have a collective thing. The other thing I would just like to say about people getting to the market. At the sheep farm, I have ethnic people that I didn't even know existed in Berkshire County. I have Russians, Italians, Greeks, Armenians, Lebanese. It's really quite interesting, and they come to the farm. I sell them right off the farm, and it's word of mouth. It's fascinating to me, and I have grown up in this area. And some of them come from Waterbury and Torrington in Connecticut. Some of them come from up in New York State. They will travel a long way. The Russians come from Westfield, and they come a long way to get what they know and how it's grown. They are purer because of maybe European practices and so on about what they eat than we are. We go for that macaroni and cheese, but they don't. They want an animal intact. I mean, they want something that they know and can see and choose. So they have a ball when they come to the farm. It's really fun.